Hello, my name's AJ. I'd like to welcome you to the SFE program. As you probably already know, SFE stands for Sustainable Forestry Education. It is an educational program designed to provide information about forestry topics to meet the needs of loggers, foresters, and landowners. It outlines some key information about forest ecology, silviculture, best management practices, and maintaining loggers' safety. The SFE program requires the commitment of 16 hours using over a 2-day period to cover the range of topics mentioned above. This logger education program was developed with the support of many people, including several loggers who actively participate in this development and initial implementation. Today, the Michigan Sustainable Forestry Initiative is supporting logger education programs such as Michigan's SFE program throughout the country. Your attendance today is an indication of your commitment to improve the business of logging and forestry. What are the goals of the SFE program? Provide a continuing educational opportunity for loggers and foresters, but landowners will also benefit from the information presented. Improve the level of communications between loggers, foresters, and landowners. Why would loggers be helped by the SFE program? Foresters have historically developed forest management plans for the landowners, but it is the logger who implements these plans. Knowing and understanding why foresters make certain decisions can help the loggers implement a forest management plan, but it also provides the opportunity to suggest changes to the plan. It is important, therefore, that foresters, loggers, landowners, and others understand each other. Increased communication between foresters, loggers, and landowners can help avoid or minimize problems that can occur during harvesting operations. Thank you for being part of the Sustainable Forestry Education Program in Michigan. I believe your participation in this program will help in improving the image and practice of forestry on the ground and in the woods. The next topic is the definition and application of silviculture to forest management in Michigan. The forest ecology concepts covered in another session will be used as a basis of applying the silvicultural treatments discussed today. Here's a few comments from Warren Sahosky.
Hello, my name is Warren Sahosky. My son and I own and operate a small logging company in Daggett, Michigan. About 20 years ago, a worldwide movement had begun to ensure that forests would be managed in such a way that both present and future generations of forest-based needs could be met in our region. The pulp and paper industry was a strong promoter of sustainable forestry practices. The movement has expanded to solid wood products, and today we note that the woody biomass market is beginning to source its fuel from certified, sustainably managed forests. The Sustainable Forestry Initiative program is the only certification scheme in the United States that requires education for loggers on a continuing basis. Change drives the need for continuing education. Historic and new insect and disease problems arise. Invasive species become more of a threat to forest health. Additional species are added to the threatened and endangered list. Regulatory agencies keep ratcheting up requirements on how we protect our resources. Having visited many logging jobs in the Upper Great Lakes region over the past several years, I sense that the quality of work and environmental awareness by loggers has improved considerably due to logger training. With close to 50% of the wood supply occurring on private non-industrial ownerships, it is important that loggers be well trained because often they have to function as foresters as well as loggers. Many studies have shown that revenue from forest products is often 10th or lower on the list of objectives for these ownerships. This means that loggers need to be knowledgeable about forest growth and health so that they are able to clearly explain to landowners and the general public the need for continual management of the forest. Today, society is involved in determining how our natural resources are to be managed. The public gives us the social license to carry out those activities that they perceive will maintain and create the forest that they desire. It is important to note that at least with regard to publicly owned forests, their first priority is to provide a wide variety of recreational opportunities. Knowledgeable, well-trained loggers will be an important factor in shaping the public's perception of good forest management. So, what's in it for loggers if they meet the expectations of forest certification programs? As we are well aware, no one in the chain from the stump through the consumer is willing to pay more for products from sustainably managed forests. Loggers benefit when the mills they sell to are able to maintain or improve their market share in the face of increasing global competition.
The SFE program uses a combination of video, slide presentations, group discussions, written material, and field trips to cover the areas of forest ecology, silviculture, best management practices, logging aesthetics, wildlife habitat, and logging safety issues. The following silvicultural video is divided into several topic areas. I will introduce each topic and summarize key points of each topic during the program. I want to warn you that there is a tremendous amount of information being presented. I encourage you to use the following suggestions. You won't be able to learn all that you hear and see in 1 and 2 hour workshops. It is important that you use these helpful hints. The written materials are provided to support and further explain the information presented in the video. Relax and ask questions. Facilitators can stop and rewind the video at any time. Key points will be clearly highlighted after each segment. This session is for you. Don't be afraid to ask your questions. What is silviculture? What is a silvicultural system? Silva means tree, culture means to grow. Therefore, silviculture is the growing of trees. What does it take to grow trees? An understanding of the differences in tree species, preferred light requirements, preferred soil type, moisture and nutrient requirements, speed of growth, method of reproduction. In other words, you need an understanding in silvics of a tree. Silviculture is applying the knowledge of forest ecology and silvics to tree growing. Reasons for growing trees are wildlife habitat, aesthetics, plant diversity, soil protection, timber production. These are all landowner objectives that can be met through silviculture. The first two reasons listed are often the two major reasons private individuals own forest land: wildlife habitat and aesthetics. Timber production often does not appear on a landowner's top 10 list of reasons for owning forest land. Or if it does, it appears at the bottom. Silviculture has developed systems of establishment for growth and regeneration of various tree species. Standard silvicultural systems are based on the species' preferred needs for regeneration. The systems are clear-cut systems. Species need full sunlight for regeneration, often used in natural regeneration of aspen and jack pine, and for planting of red pine. Seed tree system. Tree species regenerate well from seed and nearly full sun, but need some shade and a seed source. This method is being tested in the regeneration of white birch in the Upper Peninsula. Shelterwood seed cut system. Tree species require moderate levels of shade to control the growth of other vegetation on the site to reduce the competition of regenerating tree seedlings. This method is often recommended for the regeneration of oak species, especially in the Lower Peninsula. Group selection system. Tree species that require higher levels of light than the other species of which they grow. Small areas are clear-cut from 1/4 to 1 acre to increase the amount of light reaching the forest floor. This approach can be used to encourage the establishment of yellow birch and northern hardwood stands. Yellow birch is less shade tolerant than sugar maple and will not be part of the stand in time without larger openings being available in which it can regenerate. Single tree selection system, used with tree species that are very shade tolerant. The regeneration of the dominant tree species must be able to establish and survive on a shaded forest floor. The tree species often associated with this method is sugar maple. This method, however, is not applicable to the regeneration of all tree species. Although silvicultural systems derive their name from the harvesting approach used, silviculture's intent is to ensure that regeneration results in a quality future stand. Therefore, silvicultural systems include all thinning and intermediate activities that occur in a stand as it develops. For example, as red pine stand is planted and is to be managed on a clear-cut system, if the objective is saw timber or utility poles, the stand will be thinned on several occasions to produce the best poles. Although the final harvest will be a clear-cut, the intermediate harvest, such as the row thinning on a red pine plantation, has the particular aim of keeping knot size small and growth rate appropriate to produce red pine that meet the criteria for utility poles, not the regeneration of the stand. After the landowner's objectives are determined and understood, silviculture is always concerned with two things: improving the stand quality up to the time of the regeneration harvest, and regenerating the stand at the proper stage of maturity. Depending on the landowner objectives, maturity can be either economic or biological. The first section on silviculture discusses general silviculture principles. It is important to keep these in mind as we discuss silviculture. The act of cutting trees cannot be immediately considered silviculture or proper forest management. The objectives of the landowner and the capability of the site being managed must be considered in developing the approach to management of an individual forest stand. As you might expect, Michigan has an extensive history in the timber industry. Unfortunately, much of the early harvesting was done in the absence of forest management. During the 50-year period between 1860 and 1910, the state was almost entirely clear-cut without thought for regeneration because Michigan timber was expected to last forever. Harvesting technology continued to improve a logger's efficiency to remove standing timber, which quickly depleted the state's timber supply. However, through natural regeneration and the advent of the Michigan Conservation Corps, Michigan forests were reestablished on harvested and abandoned agricultural lands. Today, 50% of Michigan, approximately 18.2 million acres, is forested with a mixture of species of varying timber quality. The timber outlook continues to improve through the practice of proper forest management. Woodlots containing high-quality hardwood and softwood timber can be found growing faster than the rate of harvest throughout the state. Silvicultural systems are concerned with manipulating forest species within the forest to enhance stand quality and future regeneration potential. Harvesting methods, on the other hand, are designed to economically and efficiently remove wood from the site. Many potentially productive woodlots have now been harvested to the point where they are only growing undesirable species or species of poor quality. Repeated high grading of a select species and size leaves an increasingly abundant number of less desirable species in the woodlot. This is the most common cause for degraded woodlots in the state. Since Michigan was clear-cut over a 50-year period, even-age stands of aspen, red pine, oak, sugar maple, and jack pine are common. Since most of Michigan's forests are even-age, harvesting techniques that improve and regenerate this type of forest structure are common. The maintenance of even-aged forests is also helped by the fact that red pine, jack pine, oak, and other valuable timber species are well suited to even-age management. The disadvantage of even-age silviculture, especially the use of clear-cutting, is a negative public perception related to this practice. Uneven-aged stands of sugar maple and oak are also common. They are the result of past high grading, which opened holes in the stands, or by using a harvest method that has created gaps in the canopy in which younger trees will become established. 5 points should be highlighted. Harvesting alone is not silviculture. Management plans to maintain future stand values are highly recommended. Silvicultural systems enhance the stand. Silvicultural goals are to manipulate species competition to improve stand quality and select a system to ensure regeneration. Michigan forests are primarily even age. Since the state was essentially cut over in 50 years from 1860 to 1910, all the forests have grown back in roughly the same age class. Therefore, even age approaches are common in Michigan forest lands. Harvesting methods are concerned with economic and efficient wood removal. Repeated removal of best tree and species leaves only poor stems and undesirable species over time. This is the most common cause of stand degradation in Michigan. Uneven age stands in Michigan are often the result of repeated high grading over a period of years. This has left mainly poor-looking stands on poor-looking sites. If the diameter method is not the way, how do foresters determine which wood to harvest in a thinning? This next video segment highlights the most often used approaches in forestry. Forest stands can be divided on the basis of age. However, on the basis of age, stands can be described by density, stocking, and stage of development, crown class, and crown characteristics. In addition to knowing any landowner objectives before any harvesting operation, the stand should be evaluated on the basis of one or more of these measures. Wood volume per acre and number of trees per acre are measures of stand density. Our third measure of density is basal area per acre. An acre's basal area is determined by totaling the cross-sectional area of all trees at 4.5 feet above the ground. This 4.5 feet forestry standard is defined by the tree's diameter at breast height, or DBH. The greater the stand basal area, the greater the proportion of the acre that is occupied by tree stems. However, the number of tree stems per acre is not defined as a basal area measure. As an example, a fully stocked red pine stand has a basal area of 120 square feet per acre. Since the stand of 611 6-inch trees and a stand of 153 12-inch trees, it is necessary to know the average tree diameter to make good management decisions. As trees grow in diameter, basal area per acre increases. Thinning stands reduces the number of trees per area and concentrates the basal area growth on fewer trees. This maintains volume growth on larger, more valuable trees and increases usable yield per acre. Stocking is a general term relating to density measures to the expected production level for a given area of land. A site is usually classified as non-stocked, understocked, fully stocked, or overstocked. To help ensure that a stand is never overcut and is maintained in a fully stocked condition, stocking tables have been developed to relate basal area per acre to the number of trees per acre. These stocking tables provide measures determining the yield target for each thinning. Properly managed areas in well-stocked stands should be evaluated for harvest every 10 to 15 years, and in fact thinned several times during a single rotation. As a forest stand matures, there is differentiation of prime locations within the canopy. Vigorous species will outcompete slower growing neighbors and gain a superior crown position in the canopy. Because thinnings are conducted to accelerate or manipulate tree growth, crown position is an important and convenient criterion for selecting trees. There are 4 categories for relevant crown positions. Dominant crown extends beyond the general canopy level and receives direct sunlight from above and some on its sides. Codominant crown blends with the general canopy level and receives direct sunlight from above and very little on its sides. An intermediate crown is generally shorter and extends into the general canopy level. It receives little direct sunlight from above and none on its sides. An overtopped or suppressed crown is entirely below the general canopy level and receives no direct sunlight. Another important set of selection criteria used during thinning involves looking at crown characteristics. Crowns that are poorly formed or cover less than 1/3 of the total stem height are candidates for thinning. There is little growth response from trees with small or poorly formed crowns. Slow growth response by these trees close holes in the canopy longer than desired. Undesirable weed species are often the first ones to respond and establish in these openings. Crop trees are well-formed individuals that are left for future harvests. Crop trees should be selected by crown position, crown form, stem form, and other growth characteristics. Landowner objectives are the first step before making any management decision. After landowner objectives are clear, then planning for a timber harvest, if needed, can begin. Landowner objectives may not be in line with silvicultural objectives. This is called liquidation of timber assets and does occur. This type of harvest has nothing to do with forestry, proper forest management, or even good logging practice, but it is a decision some landowners make. Sometimes this decision, however, is made by the timber buyer or logger alone. Timber removal should be set targets that meet the landowner objectives for wildlife, timber, aesthetics, or other values. These targets should be based on measures of density or defined stocking limits. Residual species and stems should be of the number and quality that make the stand more valuable at the next harvest in 10 to 15 years. What are density and stocking? Density deals with some concrete measure of which is in place for a stand. They are measures such as the number of trees per acre, the wood volume per acre, the cords per acre, or board feet per acre, tons per acre, and basal area per acre. This last one is often considered confusing. It is not a measure of volume or number of trees. It sums up that surface area of an acre covered with wood. Here is an example of a tree stem. Foresters measure diameter of a tree at DBH, 4.5 feet above ground level, Basal area, or the surface area of the tree, is determined at that point for each tree on an acre and is added together. For example, if this 9-inch tree cookie came out at 4.5 feet, it's equivalent to 0.44 square feet per acre if there was only one per acre. If at 4.5 feet the tree is only 6 inches in diameter, it covers about 0.2 square feet. If these two trees were the only two trees on an acre, you would have 0.64 square feet of basal area per acre. The important point to remember is that we sum these cross-sectional areas together and talk about the number of square feet per acre. We call that term of square feet per acre the basal area. A common target for red pine after thinning is between 100 to 120 square feet per acre. It ranges depending on whether poles, saw logs, or other products are desired from the stand. Hardwood basal area targets after thinning or timber stand improvement cuts are usually within 80 to 90 square feet per acre. Why not cut more wood early in harvest? Tree canopies can only add so many leaves per year. Larger holes in the canopy from heavier cuts lead to the establishment of undesirable species, and it becomes difficult over time to maintain the supply of quality wood. Stocking is a common term used to define a site. Stocking is a relative term to describe if there are enough trees on the site or too many trees for the site's productive potential. One tree planted in a 100 square foot area in the forest is understocked. We know we can grow more trees and increase productivity. However, if 100 trees were in the same area, we overstock the site. Each tree may survive, but they need more than 1 square foot to produce high quality timber. If a forest stand only has 50 to 60 square feet of low quality stems remaining after harvest, it is understocked. There is a preferred range where a forest stand is considered well stocked and productive. The next segment today deals with the difference between forest management and silviculture. The concept of forest management and silviculture are not all the same. Silviculture has two clearly stated goals: improving growing conditions for selected crop trees and initiating stand replacement when conditions are appropriate. The overall goal of forest management is to economically produce a regular and continuing supply of desired goods and services without damaging the land capability. Forest management uses silviculture as a tool to reach management goals. The forest manager determines the potential level of goods and services that can be extracted from the forest without loss of productivity, given the constraints of the site. Site capability is assessed on the basis of climate, soils, vegetation, terrain, road network, area, age class, species composition and structure, stage of development, productivity, and forest health. The forest manager then uses the management objectives to decide on the silvicultural system most suitable to the site and sets yield levels that can be sustained. The area is then divided into stands large enough and sufficiently uniformed in age structure or species composition to be managed as a unit. Many private non-industrial forest owners do not have forest management or silviculture in mind when they harvest timber. Harvesting timber without these concepts in mind is a prerogative of the landowner, but it is important to realize that there are no valid silvicultural terms to describe a simple liquidation of timber assets. The liquidation of timber is not forest management or silviculture. Silviculture attempts to develop high-value products with a market in fewer years than is possible with no management. Silvicultural treatments must be designed to meet the current economic conditions, but maintain land capability and future timber value. There is a balance to be struck between wood production and maintaining long-term stand production. The application of good forest management requires knowledgeable loggers who can apply the treatments prescribed by foresters. Meeting these objectives means a sustainable supply of wood for Michigan's forests. Forest management deals with the regular production of goods from a forest without damage to the land's capability. Forest management is based upon defining stands or units that are similar in species, age, structure, and productivity. Silviculture is the tool of forest management. It is used to maintain land capability, improve growing conditions for crop trees, improve habitat conditions for wildlife, regenerate a stand when appropriate, and balance extraction of timber products with other site uses. Harvesting is a major part of silviculture, but silviculture is not a solid liquidation of timber assets. Silviculture requires knowledgeable loggers to maintain future stand values. Intermediate treatments or harvesting activities that occur during the life of the stand are not concerned with stand regeneration. Their goal is to enhance the future stand value by improving wildlife habitat, extracting wood products, or meeting other landowner objectives. Intermediate treatments may occur multiple times during the stand's rotation, and they are part of the silvicultural system. This next segment discusses intermediate treatment. Intermediate treatments are an integral part of proper forest management because they are designed to enhance stand quality. They are defined as intermediate treatments since they take place after the new stand is started, but before the final harvest. 4 common intermediate treatments involving loggers are timber stand improvement, thinning, cleaning, and salvage. Intermediate cuts can be used to improve an existing stand and make other landowner objectives such as improving wildlife habitat, watershed protection, aesthetics, or increasing plant diversity. Intermediate treatments reduce the number of stems per acre, thereby providing important growing space, additional soil nutrients and moisture to the residual crop trees. These treatments are often difficult to market because of the low quality of timber. To sell improvement cuts, highly marketable timber is often included to help offset the cost of carrying out these harvests. However, with each succeeding cut, there are fewer but more valuable trees that are more easily sold. The implementation of intermediate treatments requires skilled loggers to minimize damage to residual trees from cutting and skidding. Broken tops, damaged stems, and roots lower log grade and tree growth potential. Silvicultural objectives in stand improvement and regeneration are complementary processes, with one eventually leading to the other. As the timber stand nears maturity, its replacement becomes a primary objective. Depending on the stand, this replacement of regeneration is accomplished through 1 or more harvests. This period from the initiation of regeneration to the conclusion of the final harvest is called the rotation. Rotations in Michigan range upwards from 40 years depending on the tree species, site, and management objectives. When good silvicultural practices are followed, the economic value should increase throughout the rotation because the quality of the stand is continually improving. Intermediate treatments enhance stand quality by leaving good crop trees for the future, reducing the number of trees per acre, and leaving more space for the residual trees by providing more moisture and nutrients. Intermediate treatments require skilled loggers concerned with what the stand looks like when the job is completed. Minimum stand damage to trees, soils, and streams adds to the stand's future value. Marketing problems are real for early intermediate treatments. If the trees are too small to commercially harvest, they are often left until they have grown into marketable products. The first harvest, although marketable, may not be very profitable to the landowner and logger. Government programs that help to offset some of the costs of performing pre-commercial harvest are sometimes available. These pre-commercial harvests are often referred to as timber stand improvement harvests. When you hear about silvicultural systems, 5 are usually listed: clear cut, seed tree, shelter wood, group selection, and single tree selection. In reality, where one system ends, the next begins. For example, the clear cut system removes all trees on the stand. The goal of regeneration may be satisfied by natural seeding, sprouting, or tree planting. The seed tree system looks like a clear cut, but there are several high-quality seed trees left on each acre. These seed trees provide for the regeneration of the site. The shelter wood system leaves more trees still. These trees provide both seed and overhead protection from direct sunlight, drying winds, and frost. For heavy-seeded trees such as oak, more trees are left for shelter wood compared to the number left for light-seeded species such as ash. Therefore, the silvicultural system selected depends upon how best to regenerate the stand following the final harvest. A silvicultural system is the sum total of regeneration, thinning treatments, and final harvest treatments used to manage a stand over the rotation. The range of silvicultural systems creates a continuum of selected tree densities that encourage and protect regeneration on forest sites. Silvicultural systems are defined by stand structure and the method used to regenerate the stand. Even-age silvicultural systems, such as clear-cut, seed tree, and shelterwood, are all often used to regenerate early successional and mid-successional species such as aspen and oak. Uneven-age systems such as a group selection and a single tree selection are often used to regenerate late successional species such as sugar maple, beech, and hemlock. Silvicultural systems are selected based on the assumption that they will provide the conditions required for regenerating selected tree species at the end of the rotation. Harvesting timber resources without regard to regeneration or forest stand improvement cannot be classified as silviculture. It is not always easy to balance the respective needs of silviculture and management. If timber yield is a major landowner objective, it may sometimes be in conflict with correct silviculture. For example, if regeneration is slow to establish, the overstory must be retained for seed production. Silviculture may rely on either natural seed protection or tree planting for the establishment of the new forest stand. Successful natural regeneration requires a regular supply of seed, preparation of a good seed bed, and favorable microclimate conditions. Trees left to produce seed should be straight, vigorous stems. The use of vigorous, well-formed trees as seed trees increases the probability that the regeneration will contain a high proportion of the best genes available. The question often asked is whether leaving valuable trees is really necessary. To not do so would be like trying to breed beef cattle with the runts of the litter. The degree of improvement depends upon the intensity of the selection and how easily preferred characteristics are passed on to the young. Stem straightness and the length and angle of branches are characteristics that are easily passed on. Therefore, some stand improvement is likely to occur as a result of the careful selection of seed trees. Tree planting is always available in the case of failed natural regeneration. Securing high-quality planting stock and properly preparing the planting site are the two major considerations on most sites.
Silvicultural systems are packages containing different approaches to improving a timber stand and replacing that stand for future generations. The systems incorporate a series of intermediate treatments to improve stand quality before the final harvest. Intermediate treatments are not always necessary, especially in the production of pulpwood from red and jack pine plantations. Before selecting an even-aged or uneven-aged management approach, you must determine the silvicultural characteristics of tree species in the stand. Often, this alone can tell you how to proceed. If you have aspen, jack pine, or oak, even-age methods will be used in most normal circumstances. If the stand is northern hardwood, such as sugar maple, beech, and/or yellow birch, uneven age methods are appropriate, but even-age methods can also be used with great effectiveness. The decision should be based on the landowner's objectives. The next segment discusses clear-cut system in more detail.
Clear-cut system. Even-age stand management is achieved through one of three silvicultural methods: clear cutting, seed tree, or shelterwood. Clear cutting is the most controversial yet most widely used silvicultural system in the world. It is simple and can be adapted to many climates, soils, and tree species. Like all simple and effective methods, however, it has often been applied under inappropriate conditions with poor results. Since clear cutting is an economically efficient method of removing wood from forests, there are instances where economic efficiency takes precedence over silviculture. The consequences has been the development of a negative public perception of clear cutting. It is, however, an appropriate silvicultural practice when used under the correct circumstances. Negative impacts on aesthetics, water quality, and recreation can be minimized when clear cutting is appropriately applied. The visual impact of the clear cutting system creates the greatest immediate reaction by the public. Many problems can be avoided by considering the size, form, and arrangement of clear cuts in relation to the visual characteristics of the landscape where soil productivity varies appreciably in the management area. the clear cut should be based on units of similar productivity and not on a predefined size because of lower yields on poor sites. Clear cutting is generally used to regenerate species like aspen and jack pine that are adapted to catastrophic events. To be most effective, the clear cut should duplicate the light and temperature regimens of open fields, conditions in which early successional species do well. Aspen suckers, red maple, and oak stump sprouts are often relied upon for regeneration in clear cuts of these species. Large and or older stumps do not sprout vigorously and should not be relied upon under all circumstances of the total regeneration of the site. Clear cutting is an appropriate management approach. It is effective in the regeneration of aspen, jack pine, red pine, northern hardwoods, and under the correct conditions, even oak. Oak regeneration often fails in clear cuts if the site is not carefully selected. Clear cutting is an appropriate silvicultural technique, but it needs to be applied appropriately. It is also very noticeable for a long period of time and therefore can easily be complained about by those who do not understand what is going on. Attempts should be made to minimize the visual impact of a clear cut along main roadways by using buffer strips or following landscape contours. It is also important to be aware of and to apply best management practices to enhance the quality of harvest operations and to protect the quality of water resources. The next segment will discuss the seed tree and shelter wood silvicultural systems. The seed tree system is the next even-age system to consider. This method leaves 10 to 25 scattered trees per acre to provide seed for stand regeneration. After adequate natural regeneration has been established, seed trees are removed. If regeneration fails, the area can be planted with seedlings. Within Michigan, the seed tree method is rarely used. The shelter wood regeneration system establishes a young crop under the overhead shelter of the existing stand. The establishment of regeneration can require the use of 2 or more successful seed cuts extending over a period of years. Depending on the degree of the overstory cover, the shelter wood method favors mid-tolerant and tolerant species such as oak, black cherry, and sugar maple. During stand development, thinning intervals of 10 to 15 years should be common. Thinnings are intended to stimulate crown development, maintain diameter increment, improve stand quality, and encourage seed production. It is important that the thinning during the preparatory stage maintain an intact canopy to discourage the establishment of undesirable species that may later inhibit desirable tree regeneration. At the same time of the first regeneration cut, the extent to which the canopy is open is dependent upon a number of factors including the tree species and climate. For heavy-seeded and irregularly seeded species, as well as those requiring shade and frost protection, canopy openings in the seed cut are very small to moderately sized. For example, an oak shelter wood should maintain 30 to 50 seed trees per acre. The actual number of trees remaining is determined by the site and past experience in similar situations. Some factors that shorten the length of the regeneration period are regular occurrences of good seed years, the regeneration of species with high light requirements, and lack of vegetative competition. The second regeneration harvest may remove the remaining overstory of light-demanding species, while light-sensitive species may require 2 or more cuts to gradually remove the overstory. The time interval between harvests in which the remaining overstory is removed varies from place to place. The state of regeneration is the chief guide to tree selection and harvest timing. Rarely in Michigan do we see multiple harvests before the final removal cut in shelter wood systems. More often there is a single harvest in an undisturbed stand called the seed cut, which is followed by the removal cut a few years later. As a result, the regeneration of a new stand may not become established well enough to sustain the final removal. The regeneration dies or is slowed down by the invasion of other vegetation more adapted to full light conditions. This delays the development of the new forest stand for several years, which also delays how soon the stand can be harvested again. Our goal in managing any of our forest stands is the general improvement of timber quality to meet the goals of sustainability, for the products society desires. Applying silvicultural principles and systems can help us achieve that goal. Uneven age systems rely on harvesting single trees or small groups of trees throughout the forest area. It also differs from the even age silvicultural systems in that regeneration establishment and harvesting occurs simultaneously. Where conditions are favorable, regeneration occurs in the gaps created by harvesting, forming small pockets of even-aged trees. The gaps created by removing single trees are too small for the regeneration of light-demanding species. The higher the light demands of the species, the greater the required size of the group opening. This variation of the single tree selection method is called group selection. Properly managed uneven age stands require entry every 10 to 20 years. As is the case with other harvests, the frequency of entry requires loggers with great skill to minimize damage to the residual stand. Single tree selection is not just the simple removal of valuable trees from the woodlot. Trees are typically harvested from almost all diameter classes to create an even flow of mature trees over time. High quality stems are also removed if they are impeding the establishment of promising young saplings and pole-sized timber. The portion of high quality trees removed increases with each harvest in a managed stand. Selectively harvesting all trees that have attained a certain diameter limit is a mere exploitation of existing growing stock at the time of harvest. Selective harvests do not ensure regeneration, and they do not provide for regular sustained yields. Often, the forest can only be harvested once a generation. Sustained yields are only possible when a range of age and size classes exists. There is a suitable mixture of desired species, and the goal is to improve stand quality for the next harvest in 10 to 15 years. The single tree selection system is often viewed as the best approach to forest management. It is believed by many individuals as the best way foresters should manage each and every acre of forest land. As we have learned, the single tree selection system was not developed to regenerate all tree species or meet all management goals. It is specifically designed to regenerate shade-tolerant tree species, such as the sugar maple. The single tree selection approach is not appropriate for managing and regenerating tree species such as aspen, jack pine, red pine, and oak. Some people often become confused by the difference between a thinning operation and single tree selection. The goal of thinning is to improve the quality of trees left in the stand, but thinning is not attempting to regenerate the stand. Thinning is an appropriate intermediate treatment in most stands, regardless of the silvicultural systems that will ultimately be used to regenerate the forest when the stand has matured. Single tree selection is more than thinning. It concerns itself with the regeneration of shade-tolerant trees. One final point is the difference between selective harvest and single tree selection. They may not be the same thing. In many areas, the term selective harvest means the removal of only certain size classes and tree qualities. The trees removed are often only trees in the larger diameter classes and of highest quality. A selective harvest can sometimes be associated with the term high grading. In other words, removing only the best trees in the stand. I need to be careful, however. In many parts of the lake states, foresters often use the term selective harvest to mean single tree selection. The removal of individual trees to improve species composition, species distribution, and the growth of remaining trees leads to a general improvement in the stand's quality. This is silviculture. Whether called single tree selection or selective harvest is irrelevant if the harvest is conducted properly. The term selective harvest is, however, often used to sell a landowner on a tree harvest and is not related to the objectives of a single tree selection silvicultural treatment. This graph shows how a selective harvest usually works. There is a removal of only the largest and most valuable trees. This is not a silvicultural treatment. The tree selection is the removal of diameters across a range of size classes. Some large trees may still be growing well and do not need to be cut. This is a distinct difference between these two approaches to harvesting a forest land. Also, You should remember that single tree selection works for an uneven age stand for shade-tolerant tree species. It cannot be used without modification if you apply it in an even age stand of tolerant trees. Single tree selection is not appropriate in any case when dealing with intolerant trees such as aspen or mid-tolerant trees such as oak. The improper interpretation of some forest ecology information can lead to incorrect conclusions regarding the application of silvicultural practices. One typical misunderstanding is that small trees must be younger than large trees. In many forest stands, small trees are suppressed trees. They were unable to compete with the larger trees and were left behind in the understory, therefore leaving small trees that are old and do not respond to release and will not result in a high-quality stand after harvest. It is important to know whether small trees are in reality young trees that can respond to release. Another concept that is often misunderstood deals with stressed forest stands. Often stress is associated with drought and insect defoliation. Thinning reduces the number of trees in the forest, but thinning does not necessarily reduce stress. Although the apparent competition for space, water, and nutrients is reduced, the remaining trees attempt to respond by growing faster. The trees must grow larger crowns to fill holes in the canopy and larger root systems to support the large tree crown. This increase in growth uses stored food supplies to meet the short-term demands of a faster growth rate. The growth response can utilize a significant amount of a tree's stored resources and make them susceptible to other damaging agents. This increased rate of growth causes stress in the stand for 2 to 3 years after the harvest has been completed. This is often referred to as shock. Another issue with some landowners and the public is the visual impact of a harvesting operation. The application of a silvicultural treatment does not guarantee that the harvested site will look good during or immediately after the harvest operation. Harvesting trees requires the use of large, noisy machines. There is dust, treetops, limbs, and debris on the landing. Other conditions associated with timber harvesting can also have a negative effect on visual quality and recreational opportunities on a site. Careful application of silvicultural practices can result in harvests that are aesthetically pleasing. Simple things such as knocking slash low to the ground, cleaning up landings, and smoothing out skid trails and haul roads will greatly improve the appearance of the job site. The result of silviculture after the harvesting is completed can be aesthetically pleasing to the landowner if debris has been knocked low to the ground, the landings have been cleaned, and the skid trails / roads have been smoothed. In other cases, results of a silvicultural operation may not be aesthetically pleasing for 1 or 2 years after the harvest has been completed. The vegetation and the regenerating trees sometimes need that time to recapture the site and begin stand replacement. However, the care taken on logging jobs can have a dramatic impact on the speed of recovery for the site. The longer a harvesting operation remains unsightly, the greater the chance of negative public reaction. This concludes our presentation on silviculture. Although we presented a tremendous amount of information about silviculture, much of it can be found in the written materials. Thank you for your commitment to the forest resources of the state of Michigan.